And welcome back, folks, to Truth versus News here on February 24th, filming at a time when Kobe Bryant's memorial service is going on. It's quite a day to remember what's happened in the last decade, in fact. And we're going to go into some very fascinating facts here. We got a breaking story here. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, Don, Scott brought up here at the end of the first hour about YouTube removing the video of Rand Paul on the floor of the Senate, which I regard as completely disgusting. Scott, would you like to elaborate?
Well, this story first broke in Politico, and then it's also been carried by The Hill and the Washington Examiner. The Hill failed to name the name, but the Examiner does. So this is very significant. And Ivy Choi, the spokesperson for YouTube, is responsible for saying why this was taken down. But let me read it really quick. YouTube has removed a video of Rand Paul using the name of alleged Ukraine whistleblower Eric Charamella on the Senate floor, saying it contravened its community guidelines. Quote, "We've removed hundreds of videos and over 10,000 comments that contain the name Eric Charamella. Video uploaders have the option to edit their videos to exclude the name and re-upload." Ivy Choi, a spokeswoman, told Politico. I'd suggest Ivy Choi is a communist spy or sympathizer here in the Bay Area, because the Chinese communists have a stranglehold on the Bay Area politics, and they're also obsessed with destabilizing America in a lot of these ways. But continuing, Charamella, 33, is a career CIA analyst and was the Ukraine director on the National Security Council from 2016 until the summer of 2017. Rand Paul read the name on the Senate floor earlier this month after U.S. Chief Justice John Roberts declined to read a question, including the name, during the trial itself. What a piece of garbage he is, John Roberts. I've heard he's a pedophile as well. Quote, "It is a chilling and disturbing day in America when giant web companies such as YouTube decide to censor speech," Paul said after the clip was removed. "Now, even protected speech, such as that of the senator on the Senate floor, can be blocked from getting to the American people. This is dangerous and politically biased. Nowhere in my speech did I accuse anyone of being a whistleblower, nor do I know the whistleblower's identity. Apparently, YouTube has taken it upon itself to decide what questions can even be asked in the public debate, including on the Senate floor," Rand Paul said. His question, according to his office, was designed to focus on the surveillance state's abuse of its powers. Quote, Manager Schiff and the counsel for the president read the question, quote, "Are you aware that House Intelligence Committee staffer Sean Misko, M-I-S-K-O, had a close relationship with Eric Charamella when at the National Security Council together? And are you aware, and how do you respond to reports that Charamella and Misko may have worked together to plot impeaching the president before there were formal House impeachment proceedings?" The Washington Examiner reported details of that relationship in October. The whistleblower lodged a complaint in August claiming that President Trump appeared to pressure the Ukrainian president to launch a politically motivated investigation into Joe Biden, one of his Democratic opponents. It led to an impeachment trial in which the president was eventually acquitted of abusing his power and obstructing Congress. Trump and his Republican allies have repeatedly called for the whistleblower to testify in public. So that's the story, Jim. Ivy Choi and YouTube have taken down the Senator Rand Paul saying that name, Eric Charamella, and now Misko, and really is alleging that they were engaged in treason, misprision of treason, misprision of a felony, undermining the president of the United States, creating dirt to try and impeach him. And that really should be prosecuted and investigated.
I'm sick of these private companies interfering in the freedom of speech and communication of the American people with political figures such as Rand Paul. We need to know the truth, and Google and YouTube and Facebook are not allowing us to get it. This is disgusting. This is a complete disgrace. They need to have any special exemptions they've been granted revoked. They need to be regulated. They need to be called to account for this offense. I find this monstrous, extraordinarily offensive, Scott.
Yeah.
I
And Jim,
am incensed.
Who's in charge here?
Let me just say on one final note on this. Let us remember and go back in history to when there was an event in New Zealand in which there was a shooting allegedly with a white guy going into a mosque. You and I and Don and Michael J. had exhaustively analyzed every second of that video and concluded, based on our military experience and our understanding of forensics and science, that no bullets were fired from that weapon into bodies, into walls. There was no evidence of any projectiles being fired into people.
It was a video game, Scott. It was a video game. It was a cartoon.
Right.
And YouTube took down our sites and so did Twitter for drawing attention to that false flag.
What we ought to take
event.
down is YouTube. It ought to be censored, massively fined, and completely regulated to not allow this kind of abuse.
This is the new war that we're facing, Jim. Like you said before, there was a 15-year process, a 15-year
Golden age.
A golden age of the internet that has disappeared into the dark, smothering, volcanic ash of the Mount St. Google, Twitter, YouTube, socialist, lobotomized young punk techies that have rushed to the East Bay and now believe that they're Nazi tyrants, but in a moral crusade. So they're shutting down speech, empowered by people like this Ivy Choi, which I consider her personally a Chinese communist spy or sympathizer. But this is the true nature of the war that we're finding ourselves. And we need to unleash ourselves and sue and attack in every way possible, legally, constitutionally, these people, these tech companies who are covering this up. If the American people knew this, they would be as incensed as you and I are, Jim.
Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning, Scott.
Yep.
Thank you for that report.
Good.
Meanwhile, talk about how timely, during the break between our first hour and the beginning of the second, new polls show Bernie surge in battleground states. Axios, the evidence doesn't back Democrats' panic that Bernie can't win. A series of new polls show that after his big wins in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, Bernie is surging in some of the major states that could decide the Democratic primary and the general election. This follows news that the Real Clear Politics average of national polls shows Bernie with the widest lead of any Democratic candidate in head-to-head general election matchup with Trump. Let me tell you, Real Clear Politics is definitive. This is the most reliable source for statistics of this kind. This is the most reliable source. Bernie is strongest against Trump in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Stunning. A new Wisconsin State Journal poll finds Bernie leading in the Democratic primaries and in the general election in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the three previously Democratic states that helped deliver the election of Donald Trump. Bernie is leading Trump by the largest margins of any Democratic candidate in Michigan, +7, and Pennsylvania, +2. It gets the largest amount of total support in Wisconsin, 46%. Bernie is the strongest against Trump in Virginia. A new Roanoke College poll shows Bernie leading Trump by 9 points in the swing state of Virginia, the largest margin of any Democratic candidate. Bernie is strongest against Trump in Texas. Vanity Fair reports a Texas Lyceum poll just this week shows Sanders performing better against Trump in Texas than any Democrat, losing by just 3 points. That's on top of a RAPTA poll showing Sanders beating Trump back in those precious upper Midwest states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. These polls aren't totally hypothetical either. Sanders boasts near universal name ID. Most voters know who Sanders is and what he stands for, and they're still choosing him. Bernie surges ahead of Bloomberg in New York. This has got to hurt. New York One reports a new Siena College poll finds New Yorkers are backing Bernie Sanders over Mike Bloomberg. Bernie leads the entire field and has a 4-point lead over the billionaire former New York mayor in the major Democratic primary state. Scott, that's fascinating. Fascinating. Even beating Bloomberg in New York.
Yeah. I think, again, we're witnessing the you know, in a sense, I said it before, there's a charge of the light brigade, passion and self-sacrifice and rushing, and Ocasio-Cortez symbolizes it well. They're not going to win anything if they go half-heartedly or become, you know, some sort of, you know, lukewarm Democrat Party. They've always been socialist, and they've always been government first to control and shape utopia. And now they're drunk on the religion of climate change. So naturally, these hysterical, the sky is falling propaganda slogans are going to, they're using this as license to justify, you know, a big government. So they're going to rush to Bernie Sanders, rush to socialism. They know they're going to lose, but they're going to bank on 2024. Jim?
Wow. Just for the record, I'm more sympathetic to Bernie than my colleague. And I think a lot of the programs Bernie favors have been very beneficial to the American people. I mean, socialism has been used to address Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, workmen's compensation, which are programs that have benefited the American people. I would be unable to make ends meet today as a retired professor were it not for Social Security. And I benefit from Medicare as well. And I'm telling you, they make a real difference. So I'm really open-minded about Bernie. I do not believe he can beat Trump. But as we have suggested before, look at the latest poll numbers now. And if he were to run with Tulsi Gabbard, I think it would be a hell of a race. That's my take. A hell of a race.
Yep.
So here we get a really fascinating story. I have found American Thinker publishes very thoughtful pieces, and this is one, and I think you and Don are going to like this.
Okay.
By Steve Feinstein, The Rise of American Idiocracy. As the 2020 campaign season heats up, the candidates are staking out their respective positions along the political continuum, looking to occupy precisely the right slot, the one that will appeal to a winning swath of voters come November. President Trump has chosen his position. He's taking the make actual day-to-day life better for people by strengthening the job market, reducing taxes, making energy more plentiful and affordable, reducing the negative economic impact and civil disruption caused by rampant illegal immigration, improving our national security by rebuilding our military, and enhancing the country's balance of trade situation by renegotiating failed agreements such as NAFTA position. It's a strong position for him to take. He's been remarkably successful in accomplishing these goals to the tangible benefit of working American citizens across every demographic group there is. Men, women, old, young, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Euro, Caucasians, everyone. Despite constant media attacks and the manic, obsessive attempts by elected Democrats to somehow reverse and nullify his 2016 victory over the increasingly pathetic Hillary Clinton, President Trump continues to make huge progress on a wide front of issues. In the privacy of their own thoughts, far away from the shrill, obligatory denunciations they shout with such utter predictability day after day, Democrats must realize that under President Trump's leadership, things are going very well in the country. This realization creates a conundrum for Democrats. They must somehow convince an electorate working at well-paying jobs and pretty happy with the way things are going, with most aspects of their lives, that somehow they're not really happy after all, and things aren't as good as the reality of their own lives tells them it is. So the Democrats have done something inventive and unique. They've created a new reality. They've created an idiocracy. The Pop Culture Dictionary defines idiocracy as a society run or made up of idiots.
That's right.
In this new democratic world, the absurd is now the accepted norm. Totally illogical thought becomes completely rational. Scientific fact is discarded for the purpose of political expediency. And historical fact is a tiresome inconvenience and can be ignored as needed. Some examples: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Freshman Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is clearly the thought leader of the current Democratic Party. Her almost daily pronouncements are laughably detached from any semblance of reality. We have only 12 years left to correct global warming. This is our World War II. Yet her philosophies and utterances somehow serve as a guidepost for all the 2020 Democrat presidential candidates. She spouts all the usual cliches. Capitalism is bad, America is evil and deeply flawed, only the wealthy are doing well, and so on. But the Democratic candidates parrot every single one of them. They may put their own individual twists on them in order to distinguish themselves from one another. But the overriding America is unfair, it's racist, and a Republican-run America will ruin the world's future. With its greed, unless we stop it, theme is common to all the contenders. Bernie Sanders. When asked by Nora O'Neill of CBS, as friendly a liberal media TV interviewer as there could possibly be, what his universal government-run health plan would cost, Sanders replied, "I don't know, no one knows." She was incredulous, which is kind of incredible in and of itself. He calls himself a Democratic socialist, but is never asked to specifically explain exactly what that means or what percentage Democrat and socialist things are in his imaginary world. Like the cost of his healthcare plan, Bernie doesn't know. His plans and thought processes are idiotic. Joe Biden, or Joe, is he even still in the race? He gives every indication of not knowing exactly what world he's in from moment to moment. He lurches from so-called moderate to freebie Joe as the exigencies of the moment change. However, there's no question that Joe is desperately trying to find that magical thinnest sliver of unfulfilled need, which simply may not exist in the minds of those critical swing voters, so that he can come to their rescue. He'd have a better chance if he knew what state he was in. Michael Bloomberg, conveniently disavowing the conservative governing principles he embraced to great advantage while serving as mayor of New York, Bloomberg has tried to fall right in line with current Democratic talking points. But an unexpected audio clip of him enthusiastically defending effective stop and frisk practice some years ago has given the lie to his credibility as a minority-loving candidate in the Democratic mold. His advertising theme is emblematic of the difficulties the Democrats face. Mike will get it done. Get what done? Yeah. Reduce unemployment, especially in the minority community, increase wages, reduce minority poverty, and their need for food stamps, make us energy independent, immune from worldwide oil shock. To get it done, Mike will have to create a new bizarro world, a world where everything is different. In the real world, the world where we all live, President Trump has already gotten it done. Sorry, Mike. See Joe Biden above. Yeah. Nancy Pelosi. She roughs up her copy of the President's State of the Union speech, and it's okay. Nary a word of criticism from any Democratic politician or the liberal media. One can only imagine the horrified outcry had a Paul Ryan done the same to President Obama. This from a person who says she's Catholic and there's no hate in her heart for the president. For Pelosi and the idiocrats, it's fine to invoke religion when rationalizing their preferred behavior. But when pinned down about the conflict between their support for abortion and Catholic values, Pelosi and her ilk quickly retreat to the tired argument of supporting established law versus holding their own private, personal opinion. Established law can easily be changed by a vote of conscience if it mattered to you, sort of like the way the Jim Crow laws were changed. Got that, Nancy? So in the Democrats' new reality, their idiocracy of anti-Trump all the time, since Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats are such disingenuous hypocrites, is reduced to uttering such nonsense as hip, hip, hooray, unemployment is down. What does that mean to me and my life? That was in 2018, and Pelosi was referring to lagging wage growth. Now, of course, we enjoy very strong wage growth, and the strongest increases are at the lowest end of the wage scale, where Democrats have traditionally mined votes with their giveaway programs. Another issue whisked away from the Democrats and pocketed by President Trump. President Trump has cut off the political escape routes for any rational election opponent. Minorities are doing better economically than at any time in our history. We've reduced common emissions more than any other country on earth. Wages are all rising. We're energy independent. Every aspect of American life is getting better and better. The Democrats have no real opening, so they're reduced to fabricating an idiocracy where their candidates recite total nonsense and they think we'll fall for it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Trump Arizona rally, 18% of attendees were Democrats, 20% didn't vote in 2016. He's massively expanding his base. According to Parscale, this is a campaign manager, the stats from Arizona are as follows: 67,500 tickets sold, 29,990 voters identified, 87% of whom were from Arizona, 26% didn't vote in 2016, 18% were Democrats. This is in line with data from other recent rallies in key swing states and New Jersey. At President Trump's rally in Ohio, nearly half the attendees were either Democrats or independents. 23% identified as Democrats, 20.9% identified as independents. At his rally in Wisconsin, the majority of attendees, 57.8%, were not Republicans. At his rally in Wildwood, New Jersey, 26.3% of attendees were Democrats. 10% didn't vote in 2016. At Trump's rally in New Hampshire, 25% of attendees were Democrats. 17% didn't vote in 2016. Can you imagine anyone on the stage last night even attracting an audience that's even 5% Republican, alluding to the Democrats' debate? While the Democrats continue alienating most voters by trying to out-liberal one another, Trump is only pandering to the sane. Scott, it's fascinating what Trump is doing here with great success.
Yeah, I see that all those Democrats, I don't recall seeing any Democratic rebellion or, at those conventions. It seemed like these Democrats were for Trump. How about that?
Well, Donald Trump is an independent, unique personality in the political lineage of America. He's a businessman. He's a multimillionaire. He's a player, not a pervert, not a predator, a player kind of thing. Yeah, there are accusations of some darker things, but we'll stay away from those right now. He's dealt with Republicans and Democrats to get things done, to get buildings built, to do, Trump was admired for his, lifestyles of the rich and famous sort of gifts and skills. And he entered politics as a deal maker, as an independent moderate. He's socially moderate. I'm socially conservative, but he's socially moderate. I think he's economically conservative, whereas Bush was economically, moderate. Bush was using government to do things and fund things, and some of the things were good, but again, it's sort of unconstitutional for government to engage itself in certain cultural, activities. And Trump is, I think, he needs to really embrace that and cut the budget, cut the agencies, yes, he has to cut the military. He has to get rid of this flatulent bureaucrat military industrial complex. But as long as he appeals to the moderates and he says, look, I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I'm a moderate, independent, conservative, constitutionalist. And, I invite all Americans, if you're happy with your life, if you're happy with your economy, if you're happy with America, and I want to bring wages and companies back to America, and I'm doing that. I started as a businessman, and I did not like to see factories shut down in Ohio and the Midwest. I don't like to see Americans lose their job. I grew up in America where you had cars and shoes and refrigerators and TVs manufactured here, and I don't like it when it goes away, and I want to bring it back. And I think every American, especially the blacks and the Hispanics and the blue collar ones, would support that. And that's really where I think he needs to go, is a moderate, pro-American personality. And he's got that on his side. So the Democrats, of course, are their own worst enemy. They're the gift that keeps on giving. These shrill maniacs that are pulling their hair out, that are hitting themselves in the head with a hammer, that are, just slapping themselves, trying to wake up from this nightmare that ended the Obama, Hillary Clinton, Hills Have Eyes, Event Horizon future for America. And they're so arrogant, so stupid, and so viciously anti-God, anti-family, so fanatically obsessed with crushing the American independent liberty spirit of people that I think the vast majority of Americans are turning away from the Democrat Party and the mainstream media, precisely because of shows like Don's Truth versus News and Call for Investigation. He is taking the average American into these, these caverns in a labyrinth of looking for knowledge, looking for gold, looking for analysis of things going on, looking for voices that are clearly or articulately presenting the truth with regards to everything. What we see, the false flag attacks, 9/11, the greatest false flag attack in the history of civilization, the false vaccinations, the oppression of government, the fake police forces that are covering their arms with blood on video. These aren't things that we're just talking about. These are videos and footage and camera things that we're catching, and we're putting it out there saying, I've got a problem. There's something that doesn't meet the reality test here. I've got a problem with the New Zealand shooting situation because I don't see bullets going through bodies or into drywall. I don't see people reacting that they do in combat. And I've seen combat. Jim Fetzer's seen the military trajectory of a lot of these things. And when we call attention to it, I think the average American is coming away with an awakening, an enlightenment. And I think Donald Trump is causing the same thing, politically speaking, in the vast majority of Americans. And he's doing it quietly and with a friendly smile, where the Democrats are doing it with an angry, raging, pounding fist and really an idiocracy mentality. They are a shrill, screaming voice that the average American will have no part of. And they're not going to vote their way. So the Democrats are you're probably going to see Trump gain like 55% of the Americans, and 45% will go to Democrats in the next election. Jim?
I think that's a reasonable projection, Scott. Yep. Meanwhile, Trump tweets on cases make my job impossible. This is the Attorney General, who in my opinion is a very good man. Trump admits tweeting makes Barr's job harder, despite Attorney General Bill Barr's plea for his boss to stop tweeting about Justice Department matters. President Trump continued to launch attacks at prosecutors and the judiciary Tuesday morning in his fury at certain federal cases. Reports Barr considering quitting over Trump tweets. I think that's not going to happen, but it is certainly a way of gaining the president's attention. Meanwhile, federal judges have called an emergency meeting in response to Barr and Trump. I don't believe that meeting is going to go anywhere. Meanwhile, Roger Stone sentenced to 3 years for lying witness tampering as the case roils the Department of Justice. GOP operative Roger Stone, whom I regard as a personal friend, was sentenced to move to more than 3 years in prison on Thursday after days of drama ensnaring career prosecutors, the Attorney General, and the President over how severe Stone's punishment should be for making false statements to investigators during the Trump-Russia probe. The U.S. District Court Judge Amy Berman Jackson, while taking a firm stance toward Stone in the courtroom, also said the up to 9 years originally sought by federal prosecutors was excessive. That's more than twice than the average person convicted of rape receives, 4.5 years, twice for a nonviolent offense. Her sentence of 40 months was considerably less than that, yet far more than the probation sought by the defense, and certainly tough enough to keep speculation alive about a possible pardon from President Trump. In court, Jackson repeatedly made clear she holds Stone responsible for his circumstances as his lawyers sought leniency. Mr. Stone lied, Jackson said. She also said Stone injected himself smack into a political controversy that was not persecuted. Jackson called Stone's action deliberate and planned, lamenting his utter disrespect for the rule of law, but also noted supporters sent compelling letters to the court describing as caring and generous. Stone chose not to speak when given the opportunity. He showed no emotion when the sentence was read. Later, he left the courthouse without speaking as he was mobbed by media and onlookers, one shouting, "Lock him up." Stone, a longtime advisor to President Trump before he was elected, was convicted in November on 7 counts of obstruction, witness tampering, making false statements to Congress on charges that stem from former special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, which we know was shoddy and unwarranted to begin with, where the chief judge of the FISA court has already declared the third and the fourth of the 4 warrants that were seeking surveillance and were invalid. And I have no doubt will rule the same for the first 2, which will mean that all prosecutions and investigation resulting therefrom are fruit of the poisonous tree and will be eventually eradicated and reversed of necessity, including the prosecution of Roger Stone. Meanwhile, a rare picture of what karma looks like: Hillary for prison, 2016, from Roger Stone, with which I could not more agree.
Right.
Scott, your thoughts?
Well, this is a case that warrants a renewed trial because of the jurist that was inserted into the jury that has a clear bias against President Trump. That's the easiest nail to hang the hat on. Is you've got this spokeswoman for the jury who came in and she was a lawyer, she was anti-Trump, and she's totally polluted what a jury is supposed to be. And again, we said last time, I want to see a jury raise their hand and swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. And we're fools if we don't demand that. And this jurist came in biased, and Stone should be totally warranted a new trial because of it. Amy Berman Jackson, I suspect she's a rabid Zionist. She's an anti-Trump, pro-Hillary, pro-Obama person. She was appointed by Obama. That being said, she's on the bench, but they've made a motion to remove her from sentencing this because of her comments to Stone and all the rest of that. And again, this entire prosecution of Stone and Manafort and General Flynn has all been fruit of the poisonous tree. And that's the motion that should have been filed from the very beginning. You cannot prosecute Roger Stone because it is fruit of the poisonous tree. Had this false report, the FISA report, the Steele memo, and all of these things not been invented from Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr and Fusion GPS and James Comey and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, if all of them had not unconstitutionally and with treason and malice aforethought weaponized the very institutions and agencies that the American public both fear the most and thereby invest the most trust into that won't turn against them, had these agencies not been weaponized by political opportunists, none of this would have transpired. Now, Roger Stone, if he answered a question with pride, with hubris, with recklessness or error. He is an older guy. Who knows if he's on medication? He may have had some memory relapses. But someone who didn't come in doing a crime, didn't try and siphon or steal for money or things. It's ludicrous that they would put a charge and stuff against him. Now, Barr, as the Attorney General, has the authority to say this is a miscarriage of justice. When they put Roger Stone in jail, he's in the custody of the Attorney General, and the Attorney General theoretically could instantly move to remove him or put him up for something else. Anything's possible. And I know Trump will give a pardon to all of these guys after the election. He's just not going to do it now because it jeopardizes, again, the fragile political waters that people are calculating. They don't want to go against him. They don't want Bernie Sanders or others saying, you see, President Trump gives pardons to all his cronies, to all his criminal corrupt. He doesn't want that in the atmosphere because it can be harmful to him. But this whole thing needs to be completely reset. And again, I remember talking to Michael Cohen, Trump's attorney, and giving him shell game. And
Oh, wow.
I'm still convinced that's part of the reason that they went after him is because of shell game. I know I had given it to General Michael Flynn as well, and I know I had also given it to other people, General James Mattis when he was commander of Central Command. So all of these people that have gotten shell game, which describes Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Covington and Burling and the Clinton Foundation involved in this massive Swiss bank pay-to-play shell game before 2009, before the Ukraine, before the all of the episodes that followed. This was the first thing that they did. I'm convinced this is one of the reasons that they've come after these people. I had people in Texas tell me they were interviewed by the FBI and told they knew who I was, which I don't have any fear. This is about getting the truth out about the real crimes that occurred under Hillary Clinton and Obama. And they've been pushing this against Trump, I think, to distract people away from it. Jim?
Thanks.
Really quickly, I guess I compare Stone's conviction with Weinstein's conviction today. Do the crimes justify the sentencing, or how they compare? That might be something to think about. Go ahead.
Your point. Did Weinstein get a sentence yet?
Oh yeah. Well,
no, Weinstein hasn't got a sentence yet. They won't give him a sentence, but they're speculating. They're speculating he'll get 25 years.
Yeah.
That's minus the years he'll get if he's convicted in California of the other crimes.
Yeah.
Well, very different. One's political, the other has nothing to do with politics.
That's right.
Will Turkey drag America into a World War III scenario with Russia? The U.S. military is cautious about the role it's playing in Syria, while the State Department is eager to step in and help Turkey as it tussles with Russia. Russia and Turkey are headed toward a Cold War nightmare scenario after fighting between the two major powers in Syria left 2 Turkish soldiers dead. Syrian ruler why don't they call him president? See, they don't even want to admit he's a democratically elected president of Syria. Is driving his forces into Idlib, the last rebel-held stronghold in Syria, with Russian support. Turkey faces a humanitarian crisis on its border as up to 2 million Syrians fleeing Assad's rule are left with nowhere else to go, and Turkish forces have entered Idlib to stop the offensive. Now the United States is mulling its response to the escalating tensions. Meanwhile, shadow of war. What are the odds Turkey will start a full-scale offensive against Syria and Idlib? Tensions are boiling over between Ankara and Damascus as Turkey vowed to take matters into its own hands and openly intervene in Syria's Idlib province, where government forces are routing the Turkish-backed militants. The troubled northwestern province is the last major bastions of the militants in war-torn Syria. It saw another round of escalating violence Thursday. Local armed groups seeking to push back the Syrian army from the territories along the strategic highway it recently seized were counting on support from Turkish artillery, which only stood down after Russian forces in the area intervened. Erdogan says Turkey will not withdraw from Syria's Idlib until attacks by Damascus stops. Turkish President Erdogan vowed not to remove Turkish troops from Syria's Idlib region and said his upcoming phone call with Russian leader Vladimir Putin will help Ankara to determine its policies. A phone call between the two leaders to discuss Idlib is expected to take place Friday evening. That would have been last. The result of the conversation will determine our attitude in the area, Erdogan said. The Turkish leader stated that Ankara will not pull out its forces while operations by the Syrian government continue there, which is a bit absurd. After all, this is Syrian territory. Yes, Israel wants peace after getting rid of all the Palestinians. Billboards posted against Tel Aviv showing Palestinian leaders blindfolded and on their knees revealed what many Israelis think. Over the week, pedestrians and drivers in Tel Aviv caught a glimpse of an especially disturbing billboard that had been posted across the city, erected by the far-right group Israeli Victory Project. It showed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh blindfolded and on their knees against a background of destruction. The caption read, "Peace is only made with defeated enemies." By Sunday morning, Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Huldai had ordered the billboards taken down, saying the images incite the kind of violence reminiscent of ISIS and the Nazis.
Yep.
But what was actually disturbing about the billboard was not the incitement. Israel does not need cheerleaders when it comes to the violence it metes out against the Palestinian people. What is particularly nauseating is the way in which the billboard lays out for all to see the darkest, sickest aspects of Israel's collective gaze vis-a-vis our neighbors. Firstly, the text itself. Peace is only made with defeated enemies. Anyone who hopes to bring his enemy to his knees and blindfolded, no less, has no interest in a peace deal. He is solely interested in submission.
Right.
That is the bitter truth at the heart of all the peace talks and negotiations with the Palestinians. Israel wants to bring Palestinians to their knees and force them to accept disgraceful deals of defeat, while thanking the Israelis for the painful concessions they've been forced to bear. That Abbas is seen raising his hand in defeat, like something out of an execution scene, reveals yet another truth. Israel has never truly distinguished between the various Palestinian political streams or their approach to the Israeli occupation. To Israel, there's no real distinction between the leader of a movement that believes in armed struggle and the one who endures the continuation of security coordination with Israel in order to prevent buses from blowing up in the heart of Israeli cities. The truth is that everyone must be brought to their knees. All must submit. After 50 years of brutal military occupation and over 70 years of oppression, what is the significance of the defeat that the Israeli Victory Project believes Israel must aspire to? The total destruction in the background provides the hint. Defeat means the Palestinian people must wallow in death and decimation while the most moral fighter jets in the world circle above them. This, according to the sign, is Israel's strategic goal. And if this is the goal, then the valley of death that Israel has established in Gaza is a resounding success. Yeah. Scott, your thoughts about this report?
Well, we've seen the USS Liberty attack in the 1960s as part of the Israeli agenda to cover up their crimes in the Egyptian war, sink an American signal ship, and they killed numerous Navy sailors of the United States back then, and Johnson covered it up and hushed it up, and no Americans really know about that. And then, of course, 9/11, the 9/11 attacks, where you had the Jewish Oidigo telemessenger system warning not to go to the Twin Towers, and then, of course, the Mossad agents that were videotaping the event. The Israeli government, these agents are not the allies of the United States; they're the enemies of the United States. And I'm not saying all Jewish people are the enemies of the United States, but these practitioners of the USS Liberty and Twin Tower attacks and other similar false flag operations, which I would probably include as the fake attack on the U.S. Base that warranted the U.S. counterstrike, where 25 individuals were killed, and set up this tit-for-tat embassy siege, and then the assassination of Soleimani, and then the Iranian response. These are done by Israel to further its geopolitical Odidanon plan and expand its footprint. And it is not in the interest of the world. That's why the world has opposed it. The world and the United Nations have said it's illegal to annex the Golan Heights. That belongs to Syria. And any attempt to stifle and stop people vocalizing their protest is unconstitutional in this country. It should be thrown out by the world, and I think it is. I think the world is sick and tired of Israel's aggression because you're seeing a very violent apartheid Nazi state where these Palestinians and the people in the area are subjected to inhuman conditions. There are trucks that patrol in the Palestine area that spray feces, Jim, on the walls of buildings and the windows. It's a sewer truck. I've seen the video of it, and it's driving through and it's spraying with a fire hose feces.
Human excrement, just disgusting, Scott, just disgusting.
Biological warfare. So, Trump is skating thin ice.
Yeah.
And again, it rests, and I've given interviews on this, it rests on Christian Zionism being the cult, being a heresy, being a false teaching of Christianity, which says God's moral heart is contained in the genetic Jewish people, wherever they are, and they just happen to be in Israel. So God's prophetic, apocalyptic movement of nations and tribes and the timeline of history, he is putting his moral heart in Israel. Therefore, every Christian has to submit and donate and protect everything, regardless if this people and this government is engaged in child sex trafficking or homosexuality in Tel Aviv or the monstrous murder and assassination of Palestinians or anybody else that they define as not worthy of life. The Christian Zionist movement, gives full blind support. And this too is I think falling apart and in these times are being exposed as false. But I'll end it there. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, there's another Middle East story I want us to address. Saudi Arabia sees no obstacle to granting Palestine to Jews, says Yemen's Grand Mufti. The Grand Mufti of Yemen and head of Yemen Scholars Association says Saudi Arabia sees no obstacle to granting the entirety of Palestine to Jews, describing such an approach as the principal policy of the Riyadh regime. I have been interviewed by Press TV about Pompeo's visit to Saudi Arabia's deference to Israel's foreign policy. The visit by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Saudi Arabia is another form of deference to Israel's foreign policy, rather than staking out one that promotes the interests of the United States, says an American academic and analyst, James Fetzer, in an interview with Press TV. Pompeo met with Saudi Arabia's king Salman bin Abdullah Al Saud and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and discussed shared security interests in the Persian Gulf and alleged Iranian threats. Fetzer said Saudi Arabia was financially involved in supporting 9/11, which was orchestrated by the CIA, neocons, and the Department of Defense and Israel to draw the United States into the Middle East to take out the modern Arab states that served as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the entire region and eventually to confront the Persian nation of Iran. Saudi Arabia also displays its uncivilized conduct by the brutal murder and dismemberment of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey, which was clearly the responsibility of the Crown Prince, and by his brutal war in Yemen against the Houthis who want to retake control of the government and restore democracy, where I agree with a Grand Mufti of Yemen who observed that there will be no real change in the region until Muslims free themselves from the yoke of the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Now Iran has a very powerful case to make against the United States for the commission of war crimes on the one hand, by virtue of the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, who was the master of counterterrorism in bringing together disparate forces to defeat ISIS-Daesh, which had been created by the United States, and also was a political leader of Iran in violation of the prohibitions against preemptive attacks, unless you have permission of the Security Council or there is an imminent threat. But more importantly, Iran is being subjected to collective punishment in the form of sanctions that were precluded by Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which was dedicated to the protection of civilians in time of war. Iran must carry their case to the UN Security Council, where the Geneva Conventions have passed into the body of customary international law, making them binding on all nations when engaged in armed conflicts to gain the moral support of the international community, which Iran fully deserves and is entitled to receive from that august body. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I would say, again, ending the Middle East situation, we've had reports from people like Senator Dick Black, who was over there and has said really the enemy of the United States is Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia giving Palestine to the Israelis is not a surprise. Saudi Arabia has been working with the Israelis to destabilize, Assad. So has Turkey, of course. Turkey has been responsible for a lot of the financing of Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, ISIS, with its oil transportation and things like that. So I think we're witnessing the true colors of a lot of these operations. Jim?
Yeah, very good, Scott. Very good. Mm-hmm. Virginia's assault weapons ban falls after Democrats balk. This is welcome news indeed. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam's bid to ban the sale of so-called assault weapons has failed after Democrat senators balked at the controversial proposal. Those opposed opted to shelve the bill for a year in order for the State Crime Commission to study the issue, a decision that drew cheers from gun advocates during a highly anticipated committee meeting. 4 moderate Democrats joined Republicans in Monday's committee vote rejecting legislation that would have prohibited the sale of certain semi-automatic firearms, including popular AR-15 style rifles, and banned the possession of magazines that hold more than 12 rounds. The bill was a top priority for Northam, a Democrat who campaigned heavily for a broad package of gun control measures, where he and the legislature were brought into power by Michael Bloomberg, who sought to install 16 state legislatures with anti-gun fanatics, succeeded in 14, the most important being Virginia, because he wants to make gun control the centerpiece of his presidential campaign. Gun owners and Second Amendment activists accused Northam and others of the attempt to confiscate commonly owned guns from law-abiding citizens, despite the governor's repeated assertion he does not want to confiscate guns. He argued that banning the sales of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines would deter mass murder. Tens of thousands of Second Amendment activists flooded the state capitol in protest of the bill, many exercising their right to open carry. Still, while Northam's scary-looking rifles bill has failed, he's been able to push through much of his gun control agenda. Earlier proposals to ban possession of AR-15 style rifles or to require owners to register them with state police have been scrapped. He'd hoped a watered-down bill would win enough Democrat moderates for passage. Lawmakers in both the House and Senate have already advanced several other gun control measures that should finalize passage in the coming days. Those bills include limiting handgun purchases to once a month, universal background checks on gun purchases, allowing localities to ban guns in public buildings, parks, and other areas, and a red flag bill that would allow authorities to temporarily take guns away from anyone deemed to be dangerous to themselves or others. In short, if you oppose abortion and want to protect your family, don't live in Virginia. Meanwhile, a Johns Hopkins study, no evidence assault weapons ban reduces mass shooting. A study released by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health declares there's no evidence assault weapon bans lead to a lower incidence of fatal mass shooting. The push for an assault weapon ban is central to the Democrats' gun control agenda nationally and is front and center for Democrats at the state level in places like Arizona and Virginia. According to the Johns Hopkins study, researchers did not find an independent association between assault weapon bans and the incidence of fatal mass shootings. Researchers did claim licensing requirements like those in Connecticut helped reduce the number of mass shootings, but their study omitted the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School in which 26 were killed in the school and another victim killed in a private home, according to the official account. In other words, a study that claims licensing reduces instances of mass shooting omitted one of the most often cited mass shootings in U.S. history, even though it occurred in a licensing state. Moreover, Johns Hopkins' criteria for licensing laws allowed them to bypass Illinois, which in turn allowed them to sidestep the never-ending gun crime in Chicago, which has the most severe gun control laws in the country. But the study was clear. There's no evidence tying assault weapons to lower incidents of mass shooting. Get this. Madness Hub, Florida's red flag laws led to thousands of gun confiscations, and there's no consistency in how it is used. Since the infamous Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida in February 2018 massacre, or so it's claimed, I have a whole book demonstrating it was not, the red flag law adopted shortly after, has been used more than 3,500 times with troubling inconsistency. The red flag law has been used to take guns away from people deemed to be a threat to themselves or others due to allegedly troubling behavior or mental health issues. However, while some counties are using the law frequently, others aren't using it at all. The AP analysis shows from March 2018, when the law was enacted, through December 2019, there was a wide disparity in its use per capita. In Florida's 67 counties, 20 issued at least one for every 5,500 residents. Three issued at least one for every 2,000 residents, which including the county, including Tampa Bay, with nearly 1 million people. Highlands County, near Lake Okeechobee, ranked number 1, issuing one for every 850 residents. At the other extreme, 12 counties issued one for every 30,000 residents or less. 2 neighboring Panhandle counties, Escambia and Santa Rosa, issued one for every 100,000. Another 9 small rural counties issued none. This means that depending on who the police and judges are in the area where someone lives, it may be significantly more likely a gun owner is subject to the red flag law. Under the law, police have to cite threats or serious mental issues to a civil court, the AP reported. The judge then decides whether to approve the extreme risk protection order request. If the judge approves, a person's guns are taken away for a year. Police can decide to seek an extension if deemed necessary. This leads to another problem because it's a civil court proceeding. Not criminal defendants are not guaranteed a free lawyer, which can severely hurt a low-income defendant's chance to win an appeal. Though the law received bipartisan support, and such laws have grown in popularity in recent years, there are significant concerns about due process and Second Amendment violations, as well as potential for the laws to be weaponized against legal gun owners by friends or family members who may have a grudge against them. I think, Scott, that's really what's happening with these red flag laws. There are opportunities to settle grudges and scores.
Well, the red flag laws are unconstitutional. They are a criminal action against a civilian population outside of the courts, and therefore should not stand. And any police officer or any government official that violates the Second Amendment right of a citizen is guilty of violating 18 U.S.C. 241, which can get them 10 years in prison. Not 10 years, anywhere else, in prison. So that is an exercise of the criminal justice system for committing a crime. So it is a crime for the police and the government to engage in violating the constitutional right of a person by taking their firearm ability. That is enshrined in the Constitution. So we've fallen to a point where the law is totally corrupted.
And Scott, we're going to have to leave that there for today. Don, take us out. It's been great being here with you again, my friend.
Oh, wow. What a day it has been. I mean, we're covering everything here on the day that Kobe is having his memorial service, and everything is happening. And the stock market's down 1,000 points. There's so much true news that you've got to tune in here. We do give you a 2020 vision on what's really happening, and we really appreciate you joining us on Truth versus News here for February 24th. Join us again next week for another exciting thing where we correct official facts that
you can't handle the truth.